Arno. Arno, you've been my friend for how long now?
I think we met in 2014.
That's like literally, I was brand new to America.
Yeah.
I just got here a few months before we met.
Yeah. It'd be 5 years now.
It's 5 years now.
Yeah.
How is my English going?
It's bitchin'.
And Alex?
Yes.
You just met.
A few months ago, right? It was.
Yeah, September.
It was back in September when we were at
Newport Beach Yacht
Newport
Club.
Beach. Yeah.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
actually that was bitchin'. Okay.
Truly. Yeah.
That was bitchin', absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
I remember immediately. I see the back of your head, and I think you turned to wave at us right before you go up and speak, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, what are we about to hear?" It was really a special thing, I think.
Yeah, it was great to meet you for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now welcome to our humble studio.
Mm-hmm.
We're not gonna say where it is.
Not quite yet. No.
Not yet.
Live from Wagner Avenue in Culver City, California.
Oh
It's
God.
The
Umucho.
Umucho podcast.
Yes.
Oh my God! What a
When he says it, there's so much power behind it. Oh, yes.
I know.
Oh yeah.
Sorry if
So-
I'm pegging the levels there.
It's culture. Like since you're talking about umucho,
Yeah,
it translates to culture.
Umucho.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, which is something that I guess every human on this planet have.
Yeah,
We all
absolutely.
have cultures from
Right.
different worlds, and it's amazing to have you here and have you as the first guest, because you've experienced a life where you were just in this one particular culture and you were fighting to protect it in the wrong or the right way you thought
Right.
back then.
Yeah.
And then 7 years later, you find yourself outside in seeing all these different cultures. And
Right.
what does the culture mean to you?
That's a great question, I think. It was interesting. So, in my former life as a white nationalist, I had a really twisted idea of what culture was. I think people who are disconnected from other human beings tend to be really possessive about culture. And maybe like kind of elitist about it, thinking like, well, my culture is culture. That's real culture. But everyone else's, like, that's not somehow. Like, it's something
Yeah.
less. And white nationalism was certainly, that was a big part of the ideology. It was this belief that, like, anything worthwhile in the world was created by white people and white culture, and that no one else ever contributed to it, which is a complete lie. If you look at any society's culture, I believe the more contact that society, the more diversity that there is within that society, the more their culture thrives. And I really don't think there's a better example of that than the United States.
Absolutely.
As being a relatively young country, only 200 something years, our culture is really literally a melting pot from people who've come from all over the world, some voluntarily, some involuntarily, but either way, it was everybody here in the United States that created what is known as American culture nowadays. And it's something that resounds all over the world.
So during your 7 years in the white in a nationalism, how do you say?
Yeah,
it?
white nationalist, yeah.
Have you ever had food from a different culture or listened to music from a different culture? And how was that life then? Wasn't it isolating? Or, like being just, I don't know.
Well, it was interesting because I was conditioned to think that anything that wasn't expressly white culture, making air quotes around that, like there is such a thing to begin with, which is very debatable. Right. But I was trained to think that anything outside of white culture was forbidden. It was taboo. It would corrupt me. It would make me complicit in what we thought was a genocide being waged against white people. Right. Now, as ridiculous as that sounds, which it should, to me that was reality back then. But interestingly, it was when I would take a peek outside of this ideological box that I put myself into, and I experienced other culture, that's when I was like, hey, this is actually pretty nice. Like, it would be nice if I could eat a burrito at a legitimate Mexican restaurant without feeling guilty that I was betraying my people. Or to root for a sports team that had black guys and white guys on the same team. Or to listen to music that was outside the realm of the white nationalist narrative. And again, it was, that whole ideology was an exercise in hypocrisy, and it was an exercise in spinning things constantly. Mm-hmm. A great example of that is my band. We played like, it was really hard, aggressive death metal, but it was all the more powerful if you had like a really good bluesy riff in there. Yeah. It's like, we were completely aware that the music we played, the building blocks of that music, was created by enslaved Africans expressing their suffering. Mm-hmm. And with instruments that were invented by Arabic people. And with also musical bars that came from the British Isles. So, it was the music that we use to express our disdain for these other cultures, like, wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for these other cultures.
Right.
Well, yeah, you had a question.
I do, yeah. So, in reading My Life After Hate, I what really kind of jumped out at me, I wrote this down. You said that you have these white underdog mentality. I think that's kind of what you were just touching upon. Yeah. It's sort of like this us against the world mentality. Right. You know, and I thought that was, like, I felt like you felt attacked. You felt like we are quickly being eradicated, and this ideology that we have come to know and kind of cherish, you know. Was that something that you felt like it was not ingrained in you, but do you feel like that was something that you desperately needed to hold on to? Like that was something you needed something to believe in?
I think it was more the story of us versus them and us versus the world. Mm-hmm. That the feeling you get from believing that is kind of what the high was. That's what we're pursuing all the time. Mm-hmm. And we were willing to stretch and bend the truth and reality to any degree that we had to in order to feel that way. Right. This idea that the white race is under assault, like it's an active, ongoing, intentional plot to kill all the white people. Mm-hmm. That type of fear is central to that ideology. If you're not afraid, if you're not intimidated, you can't buy into the hate and the separatism. Mm-hmm. So you have to always be cultivating this sense of fear and intimidation. That if you meet some black people who are really nice and they're like, hey, how's it going? Why don't you come over for a barbecue or something? And you're like, wait, this doesn't fit my old... Yeah. Black people are savages. I should be terrified of them. Right. And they're inviting me over for dinner and they're really nice. Like, this is dumb. Everything's going haywire. It doesn't compute.
It doesn't.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think that's a common experience when you really open yourself up to other cultures. And you see the beauty of it, the whole reason to be terrified of people who don't look like you, it starts to diminish.
Yeah. Were you like someone who was always curious and like you were a leader, okay? In those in the skinhead, the group you had, you were a leader, right. Which means you were really smart. Like I know you, like you were a genius right now. It's like
I'm a gifted genius.
You are a gifted genius. Yeah.
My mom says.
You are. I see what you do right now. You use your gifts now to change the world. And when you look back and you look the younger version of you during those 7 years. I remember in your book you mentioned how you couldn't hold on to a girlfriend for more than 2 years, or a job for like a year, a couple months.
That's true. I do have to be in motion.
And then in the hate group, you were there for a whole 7 years. How did it feel? If you look now, how did it feel longer, or did it feel shorter? How do you feel that whole life in 7 years? How it went?
I think while I was immersed in the 7 years, it seemed to go by pretty quick.
Oh.
And part of that is just the age. I mean, this is a time from when I was...
How old were you?
It was from when I was 16 till I was 23.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So this is a time in any person's life where life seems to go by really quick.
Right.
Add to that I was like constantly obliterated drunk out of my mind. Mm. You start losing track of time. You're losing track of where you're at and what you're doing. And I want to make a point. There's no excuse for that. I'm not mentioning it as an excuse, but it's certainly a fact.
No,
like I was that drunk all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that as time went on, and as I started to age and like grow up, whether I liked it or not.
23, you were young.
Yeah, but it's 23 is different than 16.
Right.
So you had your daughter at 23?
My daughter I had when I was 21.
Oh, you had her at 21. And then how was that time from 21 until, when you came out? Like, I know you had like that moment where, like, wow, what I'm doing is wrong.
That was... That was definitely like kind of a reality check. My daughter's mother had 2 daughters from a previous relationship. Mm-hmm. And so when I got with her and then my daughter was born, all of a sudden within a space of a year, I go from being like buck wild single guy with no responsibilities whatsoever who's just running amok to all of a sudden now I'm like married with children, literally. I mean, I didn't actually get married. But it was a household. It was me, my girlfriend, and 3 kids. Right. And we had rent to pay and bills to pay. And we went out and we moved way out of the city into a place we couldn't afford because it was a white neighborhood. Mm. And we're really living beyond our means, which made things even more difficult. And that was, I think the stress of that, though, kind of drove home, like, okay, this is the real world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you gotta set aside all your Nazi bullshit because otherwise you're not going to be able to... like, you got work to do. You got a family to take care of. Right. This isn't, be real now. Mm-hmm. And that was a factor in the exhaustion that ultimately led me out.
So when you... I always have this question in my head. Can you ever imagine if the Arno that would have stayed in the hate trait groups, how do you think his life would have turned out at this age right now? You see your life now and the life Arno would have had. Wow.
I don't think I would have made it this far. I think I'd be dead or in prison if I hadn't left when I did. Because I was... the violence and the drinking and the disconnect from society, and I attempted suicide twice during that 7-year span. Mm-hmm. Like I was that miserable.
So you felt it. You knew that whatever you were doing, it was misery.
Yeah. Like,
why stay there? Like, why feed into... Like, why stay in the hatred? Because it's not serving you.
Right.
And, like, what... Because there's a lot of young people now who are in those hatred groups, and they probably think that's the only way of living. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what... I don't know what you thought then, because you knew a different life, right? Your parents...
My parents didn't raise me like that, no.
I know. So you knew a life outside of that hatred.
Right. Yeah, because you had said you come from, a fairly normal childhood.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I one of my dearest friends now, Party Kalika, he's a sick man whose father was murdered by a guy from my old gang. And Pardeep and I have developed a really beautiful friendship since we've known each other since October of 2012. But when we do talks, I'll talk about my childhood, and normal is a relative thing.
Yes.
Like my childhood, we had a pistol range in the basement. So we'd shoot guns in the basement. and we'd light off fireworks. And sometimes my dad and his buddies would get really drunk.
Not fake ones, like a real
Real
one.
fireworks, yeah. And me and my friends would like attack my dad and his drunk friends with fireworks, and it would erupt into this like all-night fireworks battle that would go around the house and up on the roof, and like that was normal to me as a kid. And Pardeep's like, that's not normal.
No, it's not. It's not normal. That's terrifying. Even now, I'm 29. I'm terrified of the sound of fireworks. Oh man.
To me, it was very much like if stuff wasn't blowing up like intentionally, then something was wrong when I was a kid. But as far as being, I wasn't like indoctrinated in racism or anything like that. My mother's best friend was a Liberian woman that still is to this day, and she married a white guy, and they had 2 kids, and we grew up with that family. My mom and dad would play tennis with them, and me and my brother would play with the 2 kids, and like that was also normal to me growing up. Right. So it wasn't racism wasn't normal in my childhood. Right. So all these other crazy things that were normal and that were abnormal for other people, racism wasn't one of them.
So as a teenager, you lived a double life.
Yeah, I was always kind of.
Did you let your friends know about your mom's best friend?
Did
they know anything?
When I was we call it the movement. When I was in the movement,
yeah.
We would always, and it was horrible. I would say horrible things about her. Her name's Yetta, and she's like one of the sweetest people you'd ever meet in your life. And I would say horrible things about her and her children and her husband, and it was just part of that ideology is that you couldn't show love or kindness, even for people within your group. It was seen as weak. So it was like, especially for people outside. When I dropped out of high school, my mom had a friend she knew from high school at a business printing T-shirts, and he gave me a job when I was 16, and I started working full time. And he was Jewish, and he was the nicest guy, and he let me work there even though I wore swastikas to his factory. But when I came home and I'm talking to my skinhead buddies, I'd be like, "Yeah, I work for a Jew."
Yeah.
Like the dude didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything to deserve ire from anybody, unless you were like the copyright holders of the band T-shirts he was ripping off. But as far as how he treated his employees, he was very good to his employees, and I would still talk like, "Oh, it's so horrible to work for this Jew."
Yeah. When
actually, like I have a job just because of his good graces and because he's a nice guy.
Was there any, like, going into that around sort of age 16, was there any sort of conflict that you felt? You know, because, I mean, you work for a seemingly nice man,
yeah,
and your mother's best friend is a nice woman, like, and then, you know, behind their back, you may be saying these things about it. Like, there must have been some sort of conflict inside, maybe.
There was, I think that's a great observation, Alex. And there was certainly conflict, and I think that's why I would say these horrible things about them behind their back.
Yeah. But without them knowing.
Not to their face.
It's like you'd be terrified for them to know.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done that because they were very nice people. It's hard to hate someone when they're nice to you.
Right.
But when they weren't around, I would say all kinds of horrible things about them. And I think what drove me to do that was that inner conflict that I was experiencing.
So do you, because you're a very, very genuine person, like really humble. I mean, I'm lucky I met you in the times that you were not in those groups, in the movement. So, but you were like we were talking about how humble and nice to everyone you are. You're a happy person, and you just and how hard it is for someone, like the other day in the car we were talking about how speaking about your story as a survivor, it's not easy, but it's also not you were received. You see what I mean? I don't know if you like people. It's not pity, but they kind of listen. They want to know what happened to you. But
Right.
then when you come from the side of perpetrating, like somebody, the hatred,
Right.
you're like, I did this and I changed. It's so hard to get people to listen. And,
Yeah.
and then you do it with a, you were saying how.
Well, like you were saying, there's I think there's a curiosity from both sides.
Yeah.
Like if you come from a survivor's standpoint, then it's like, there's more empathy, more sympathy for that person, but there's always curiosity for the perpetrator, for someone who may have done these things. It's like, I'm afraid you might, you put yourself out there and there's all this vitriol, there's all this hatred towards you, but there's still the curiosity. I feel like they're like, why would somebody do that?
Right.
And I'm sure that happened with
But
you.
you still open your arms and your heart to like, whatever happens, this is me. This is.
Part of that is just like my personality type. It's easier for me to open up and spill my guts and my deepest, darkest secrets than it is to hold it all in. And for some people, it is a blessing, absolutely. Because for people where it's easier to hold it in, that holding it in will kill you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it can really diminish your life. So the fact that it's exactly. For me, just it being easy to open up and be an open book, I'm lucky in that respect. But that is a point. When you are a survivor and something horrible has happened to you, you're typically going to be better received than someone who has done horrible things. I have been remarkably well.
Is not something people receive quickly, like see quickly say, we all deserve a second chance. Like it's not everyone who can, so it's more of like you help them understand that, we all can be great. We all can have,
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. And I notice I work with a lot of survivors. It's an honor to know you, Dydine, and to know your story. And I carry that story with me everywhere I go. I've spoken with a lot of...
It's an honor for me to know you, too.
Well, likewise. I know Holocaust survivors. My best friend's father was murdered by a white nationalist. I have a dear friend, Sharon Risher, who lost her mother, Ethel Lance, in the Emanuel AME shooting. So in the past 10 years, I've really intentionally sought out survivors and really just offered myself to them, and hopefully I can be part of their healing process and I can help them heal and move forward and experience the best things about life. And if I can do that, that's the greatest gift I can ask for. So I know a lot of survivors, and knowing them, it's interesting that it's the survivors who are always the first one to give me a chance. It's the survivors who are always the first one to say, like, you're more than the worst thing you ever did. And it's I tend to, I don't want to like pigeonhole anybody or stereotype people, but a lot of the people who like push back on who I am and what I do, and I don't think you changed, blah, blah, blah. All of them have been through some trauma, but not like the deep, crazy trauma that survivors have. I mean, everybody goes through trauma. I'm a Buddhist, so like Buddhism 101 is life is suffering.
You are a Buddhist.
Deal with it.
Can you highlight that? You are a Buddhist.
I am. My faith is a big part of how I see the world and what I do.
Yeah.
But so there's suffering everywhere. But I think it's the people who have been through the greatest suffering, the people who have lost everything, who have like the most to teach, and are also usually the most well-grounded. And you're a great example of that, Dydine. Like your outlook on life and just the world and how great it is to be alive and to breathe. Like that's something that a lot of people don't have who haven't been through the kind of trauma that you've been through.
It's the thing is, I know I've met a lot of perpetrators, and now you are actually fine because in my country in Rwanda, the actual perpetrators, the perpetrators that grabbed a machete and cut somebody's head, they never killed anyone.
Right.
So, but some of them, they still believe in what they believed then when they were
Yeah,
killing
they
people.
haven't changed their way
So
of
yeah,
looking at the world.
to see someone being able to see life outside of hatred, outside of anger, and realizing it that it's actually killing them alive.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
because if you've because really if you killed someone or you hurt somebody, you you're hurting yourself as well.
Yeah, that's such an important point.
Yeah, so you it's like, for example, the people like now when you look on the people are believing in like the movements, all these
Right.
movements. I when I came to America, I didn't know that still exists,
Right.
and people are still believing in what Hitler stood up
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
And it was shocking to me. It's like, that Nazis really never, where are they now? Like actual Nazis that
Right.
committed genocide.
Right.
Or Hitler, he ended up killing himself. Why would you follow somebody who was already confused about what he was talking about and
Right,
kill himself?
right,
If he
right.
really stood up for what he did and he thought it was right,
Yeah.
he would have, So it's like,
It's it's a challenging
Yeah.
idea for people to get their head around. Is that violence harms the perpetrator as well.
Yeah.
it does.
I'm always very careful never to say violence harms the perpetrator as much as the victim or even in the same way, because that's not true whatsoever. It's a whole different kind of harm.
Yeah.
But when you perpetrate violence against other human beings, it hurts you. It
Yeah.
damages who
It
you
damages
are
you
as a
because
human being.
you're losing your humanity,
Right.
your humanity in you, and
Exactly.
yeah, and most of the perpetrators actually, which is a good probably point for us to talk about. A lot of perpetrators think when they're in that world of hatred and violence and they're the only superior or the only humans and
Yeah.
whatever, they think in that moment everyone else is not human because they
Right.
dehumanize every other culture, every other race or ethnic or
Right.
color or religion. But what they don't realize is when you're actually doing that, when you're losing your kindness, you're losing your love, you're
Right.
losing your light within,
Right.
you're actually becoming what you are against.
Oh yeah.
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 So you
absolutely.
are, so it's more like how do you, I know you do a lot of work helping young people, getting people out of these movements. What's your, how can you say, what's your,
Well, what's the mindset behind it?
Yeah.
What's the driving force for that?
Something really interesting to me is that, and I notice this as I do intervention work. So I work in counter-violent extremism. That's what I've been doing for a decade now. And in counter-violent extremism, there's prevention work where you want to stop that before it starts. You want to work with young people before they make the mistake of getting wrapped up in these ideologies and like kind of develop a healthy sense of identity, purpose, and belonging so that they're kind of inoculated against these horrible ideologies. But if they're already in, now you got to intervene because you're not going to prevent it. It's already happened. So now when you're intervening, it's the same starting point as when I used to recruit people into these groups. And it's basically like, when I recruited people into white nationalist skinhead groups, if I'm talking to Joe pissed off white kid, the first thing I want to find out is what's wrong in his life. And something's wrong. Like, I didn't know this then. Back then, I just had this, like, a priori starting point to say, like, well, all white men are angry because they're being attacked. So that's why they're
so
angry.
you were looking for angry people.
Yeah, I'm looking for anger. I'm looking for fear. But I do want to hear that personal story of why that kid is angry. And more often than not, it was that he didn't have a girlfriend. You'd also hear, like, I don't have a job, or I'm not popular, or my family's poor, something like this. But of all these complaints, I don't have a girlfriend was the most popular one. And it speaks to this gendered nature of violent extremism. And everybody nowadays like say, oh, toxic masculinity, there's toxic this, toxic that. I think it's a much more healthy way to look at this to say, hey, let's just talk about what healthy masculinity looks like. Because when you go around saying, this is what's bad about masculinity, the people who need to hear that message are going to be the first ones to shut down.
Yeah.
They're not going to listen to you. Whereas when you can say, like, hey, this is what I think healthy masculinity looks like. Yeah. Now you have a starting point. Now you're not putting somebody on the defensive. Right. You're beginning a sense of wonder, a sense of curiosity, a sense of self-reflection, and that's what you got to do to get someone to a healthy point. But going back to my recruiting points, if the kid doesn't have a girlfriend, rather than say like, well, look, dude, why don't you take a shower once in a while, quit drinking all the time, and like go to school and make yourself somebody who somebody would be attracted to. That's all hard to do. That takes work. Yeah. So instead of saying that, I could be like, no, do you know why you don't have a girlfriend, white man? Because the Jews put Michael Jordan on all these billboards and magazine ads and TV ads to corrupt the minds of white women, to make them think that blacks are the ideal men and you're not. And that's why you don't have a girlfriend. So now this kid doesn't have to do anything difficult.
No, you just handed him the answer right
Yeah.
there.
Exactly. Now he has this easy out.
You're feeding into his
All he has to do is hate Jews and hate black people and blame them for everything wrong in his life, which is really like the worst thing you could do to somebody.
I know.
I wouldn't do this to my worst enemy nowadays because it cripples you. It cripples your ability to solve your problems. But back then that was a good thing. Because the more crippled and twisted and hurt that person is, the more they are going to buy all my bullshit that I'm telling them.
Did you know then that it was wrong? Did you feel it when you were recording? Like how? Yeah.
I knew deep down it was wrong from day one. And I was constantly trying to suppress that inner knowledge of the wrongness. And that took a lot of energy.
A lot of alcohol as well. Right?
Totally. Yeah. The alcohol, the violence itself, like if you're getting hit in the face, like you're
with a pipe.
Yeah, when you're getting hit in the head with a pipe, you're not thinking like, maybe it's wrong to hate black people. You're just like, boom, I got hit. Now you want to brawl, you want to scrap, you want to box. Like you're in this like heated adrenaline cocktail of combat, and like in that space, you're not thinking. You don't have to look inward.
No.
You don't have to answer these uncomfortable questions that come up when you're sitting in a jail cell, or when the dust settles and things are quiet. So it behooved me to never have things quiet. I'd be terrified to like sit there by myself. The few times I sat in jail, it would suck most of all because I'd be like sitting in a cell and have nothing to do but think and reflect. And it was a very uncomfortable place to be. Yeah, exactly. I didn't have any escape from it. I couldn't go blast my white power music or surround myself by other angry white kids or go out and attack somebody. Yeah. You can always attack somebody in jail. There's no shortage of that. But it was just, it was very uncomfortable to look inward. It was much easier to blame and push outward. Yeah. So nowadays...
Now as a Buddhist, all you have to do is...
It's a daily practice to look inward.
Quiet reflection.
Exactly. And nowadays, if I'm working an intervention and I want to get somebody out of a hate group, and it should be made very clear that this is the same process if you're talking about white nationalists or you're talking about ISIS or you're talking about Antifa. Like, whatever the violent extremism flavor is, that person's suffering. Something's wrong, which is leading them to think that this is a good idea to act and think and behave that way. Right. So the process is the same as when I recruited. I still want to find out what their problem is. Like, what's really going wrong? You
were a good listener then.
Yeah, I was, but I was very manipulative about it.
I was gonna say, it feels like there's may have been a little coercion there.
Yeah, it was. I've always been able to manipulate people, and it's like it wasn't until the past 10 years where I could like admit that. But even when I was a little kid, I could manipulate other kids. I could manipulate teachers, my parents, whoever.
What did you do as a kid manipulating your teacher? What's the story you remember? The most fun story that you did, and you're like, oh, I did it.
I once had the principal. I was a bully on the school bus, and there was one kid I used to bully ruthlessly every day. Myself, I used to punch him in the face and just make him miserable, and that got to be boring. So I got a bunch of other kids to beat him up.
Oh, no.
And he got hurt really bad. And when we got to school,
Maybe Arno was awful.
Yeah, this is like in first or second grade.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very much a sociopath when I was a kid. So the principal had our whole bus sat down at school, and we got there, and she's just like hauling off on us, screaming and yelling. And I looked at all the other kids, and they're all just terrified. And a light bulb goes off because I'm a gifted genius, and I just like got up and I cut the principal off, and I go, you know what? All these other kids are afraid to get in trouble, and I'm not. So there's nothing you can do to me. Wow. And they were all just like, the kids were, the principals, and I'm just like, yeah. Like, that's what's up. Totally.
You're not going to terrify
absolutely.
me. You're not going to see anything. I know what I'm doing. Oh,
right,
wow.
yeah. I just told the principal, I'm like, there's nothing you can do to me. I ain't afraid of you.
Yeah.
You can't.
Oh, my. Did you look up because, of course, you were a little boy? And
yeah, she was an adult.
Imagine?
Yeah, I was probably like 4 feet tall at this point.
Oh.
But it was... I would also, like, the kids that I got to beat up the other kid, I was manipulating them as well. Mm-hmm. And so when I was in the movement, I was recruiting people, I was a good listener, but I wasn't listening to help them.
Yeah.
I was listening to manipulate them.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
find little things to pull on. Yeah.
Right. And so now, the huge difference now, you have that same starting point, find out what's wrong. Now, once I can get them talking about what's wrong, and I don't have any letters after my name making me a mental health professional, but I hang out with a lot of them, so I get some of it from osmosis, namely party. But now if I can get that person talking about what's wrong, that's step one. I mean, that's therapy too. You go pay a therapist $125 an hour, they're just going to sit there and listen to you. They're going to try to get you to talk about their deepest, darkest things that are wrong, and talking about them is step one in solving the problems.
Yeah.
So if I'm helping somebody get out of the Klan or a white nationalist group or a jihadist group or whatever, I want to get them talking about what's wrong in their life. And then I want to offer my input and my help to like how can we find a way to address this issue? Mm-hmm. And if it comes back again, it's like, well, I don't have a girlfriend. Okay, well, let's, how can you improve yourself?
Are they always about boyfriends? Like
it's
more about finding their, because having a boyfriend, having a child, somewhere inside you there's you become softer. That you find that positive side of you. That
ideally.
Love. Yes. Ideally. Yeah.
And there's a lot of. I had this insight actually from a friend of mine, Dimitri Anselmi, who is he's a gay Haitian immigrant to the United States. So he's like, I got 3 targets on my back. I'm gay, I'm an immigrant, and I'm black. And like, I got to live with that every day. And he's a brilliant man. And him and I have had I haven't talked to him in a while, but we've had really long discussions. And to the point where I can, and I make a point of surrounding myself with people where I can just say whatever I want to say. I don't have to walk on eggshells, and I don't have to. I always have faith that my friends will give me the benefit of the doubt, and that they want to hear what I have to say, and vice versa. So I'm talking to Dimitri, and I just kind of I have like the straight guy observation, and I'm like, Dimitri, most of the gay guys that I know are either really good looking or really successful, or both. And that's why the more of these guys like that I don't have to compete with, the better. Like, I'm happy about that. Like, good. Like, please be gay. Yes. I want all the really good looking, successful men to be gay, because then I don't have to compete with them for women. And it's like kind of a joke, but it's kind of true as well. And I said that to Dimitri, and he goes, me and a bunch of my shit-hot, good-looking, successful gay friends were all sitting around talking about that one night not too long ago. and they all kind of shared their story, and every one of them had some kind of version of this. Is that when you're a boy going through puberty and you're in high school, there is so much pressure to like, you better not just have a girlfriend, you better have a whole truckload of girlfriends. Yeah. Like the more conquests you have, the more of a man you are.
Yeah.
And there's so much pressure to deliver all of that. And these guys who are gay are just like, not really interested. Like, and they were all kind of my age. So when they were in high school, most kids weren't out. Nowadays, it's a beautiful thing. Nowadays, there's more and more kids that are out. Yeah. And ideally, as being attracted to whoever you're attracted to will be normalized, gay kids will go through this too, ironically. They'll have this problem also when you don't have to hide your sexuality. Yeah. But when these guys did have to hide their sexuality, they did it by just burying themselves in their books. I know. And so all of these guys, by the time they got out of high school, they got like 4.0. They're taking all these advanced placement classes to college. They're just like crushing it academically. Wow. And they hit while all the other the straight knuckle dragging dude bro boys are just like, where's the girls? And they're failing all their classes, and so they're the ones who end up pumping gas, and these gay guys are the ones who end up at the big tech companies or as doctors or lawyers or whatever have you. They're very successful, and of course it's not true for all gay people, but it was to the point where I noticed it, and Dimitri confirmed this. And so I think that goes back to the pressure that that's put on young men in society. And this isn't like a thing that's exclusive to Europe or Western society. If you go to India, it's like if you're not married with 12 kids by the time you're 25, you're a failure. That's that pressure to be a man. You need a woman. You need a family. You have to produce. You have to do all this stuff.
Everywhere in the third world countries, we get married so young.
Right.
Yeah. I'm 29 right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not married. Man. I am an old lady.
You'd be an old maid in Rwanda.
Yes. Yeah. They would be, what's wrong with this woman? What's happening there?
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a common thing to all sorts of cultures. There's little variations, but really I think it's a pressure that, and there's other pressures on women. There's all kinds of stuff women have to deal with that men have no clue about, and I'm not trying to put them on scales and weigh them, but
we're all human.
Well, but the thing is, women are used to dealing with pressure. Women are used to dealing with pain and suffering and trauma, and women can do it much more gracefully than men can. Men are typically not as able to handle that kind of pressure and trauma.
Do you think it's because men haven't been through enough pain because we take care of them?
I think for one, it's that men can run.
Can run.
Yeah, and this is I've been a single father for the past 27 and a half years, so it's not like it's unheard of for a mother to take off from their kid. Yeah. But again, I think this just goes back to human biology. If you're a woman and you actually give birth to a child, you're going to be less likely to abandon that child. Whereas it's easier for a man to be like, okay, see ya.
Bye.
And because of that it's easier for men to be irresponsible. There's all sorts of dynamics in there, and there's. Yeah, a lot of this does have to do with gender roles. But at the same time, I think a lot of gender roles come from a biological place.
Yeah,
ideally, a man should be like, yes, this is my mate and this is my child, and I'm going to stay with them and defend them and provide for them. Like that's a healthy thing.
It is. It's healthy for not just for the women and the child, but also for the
man. Absolutely. It's healthy for the man. And see, going back to let's talk about what healthy masculinity looks like. That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
To be absolutely. Being a man doesn't mean pounding your chest and be like, nothing's, I'm not afraid of anything. Yeah. Nobody can beat me. It's just no. It's I'm gonna dedicate myself to my family. I'm going to put other people before me, and I'm going to do whatever it takes I'm going to do whatever it takes and whatever I got to do to provide for them and love them and care for them.
Right. That's strength.
And that's absolutely. And that's a story that and that's the thing. See, that happens more often than like toxic masculinity things do, but nobody says anything about it.
Oh no, we need to talk about that.
Right.
Yeah.
But nobody does. Everybody's just like, if that happens, then well, yeah, that's good. He's doing that's good. But let's talk about all the bad things.
Yeah.
Let's actually.
It's so much easier.
Right. It totally is.
Just people just wanted to focus on a lot of negative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
To point out, oh no, that's bad. I think that's a great point. Just turning that narrative into healthy masculinity.
Absolutely, and it's not just masculinity, but if we're talking about diversity, when I talk about diversity, I live it. I mean, my friends are people from everywhere, every kind of background you can imagine.
You're sitting with a black woman from Rwanda, black man from Dallas,
a black boy from Texas,
right?
Black boy from Texas,
and that's beautiful.
And we're sharing our lives.
But most importantly, I'm sitting with Dydine and Alex. Mm-hmm. Like you guys are awesome people, and I love you for the individual human beings that you are, which race is a part of. It's a part of that identity, but it's not all there is.
Right.
It's what's in there in the heart.
Exactly. So when I talk about diversity, I literally live it everywhere I go, all the people I work with, and I know that diversity not only works, but it's healthy. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to solve a problem and you have these diverse perspectives and diverse life experiences all coming together to solve a single problem, like you're gonna have a much better chance of solving that problem than if you got 10 straight white guys who are all 25 years old. If you're like looking at it, like, the more diversity in life experience, the more diversity in perspective you have, and the better able you are to solve problems.
So you now travel the world.
Yeah.
You've been to so many places.
I have.
You listen to. I know that you listen to these songs. That there's songs that he pretty much most of those songs are not English, and he doesn't hear a word. but his music, his favorite. What's your favorite music?
I love music from Brazil.
See?
Yeah. Brazilian music.
I know.
My favorite singer is a woman named Sao, and she's just absolutely unbelievable. And she sings mostly in Portuguese.
Okay.
But I love music in other languages, especially, and I can't speak any other languages, which helps this love, because when you don't understand the lyrics of a song but somebody's singing, then their voice is just like another instrument in the song. And it can still convey the same feeling, but going back to Buddhism, there's a space between when we experience something and when our mind labels it. Mm-hmm. And in that space is like really where life is. And that space, that's the same place I am when I'm listening to Sao sing in Portuguese. Mm-hmm. Because it's like I'm not getting the exact meanings of the words, but I'm getting a feeling.
There's a purity there.
Exactly.
There's something that you can experience in a very present way without you, like you said, like labeling it, and then you kind of categorize it. Like, okay, now it's something.
Right.
I understand. Yeah.
So I still love music in English. People singing in English, and I listen to that all the time too. But there is definitely something taken away when you know the meaning of each word, and it kind of deprives you of that space between the experience and the label.
Right.
So to me, that's diversity is the same thing. Culture is the same thing. When you are in a culture that you're not familiar with, you don't have all these expectations clouding your interaction with it. If you could just open yourself to it, in Buddhism they call it beginner's mind or child's mind. This idea that like ideally, and this is, people would argue, say, well, if you didn't have all this knowledge, you would keep putting your hand on a hot stove and burning it. Like, there's a reason why we store this knowledge in our mind. But in general, as we're experiencing life, if we can do it like we're doing everything for the first time, and that sense of wonder is there, and that sense of like curiosity and awe, like think how much different your life is going to be if you can experience those things on a regular basis. And so for me, that's how I want to live, because it's awesome. It's a great way to live. It really instills gratitude And gratitude is just one of the most important ingredients of happiness that we have. So if we look at culture that way, we look at diversity that way, we look at gender that way, we look at race that way. Look at all these issues that are problematic at the core, but you say, like, this is what it looks like when we can talk about these things in a healthy way and we can be open about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining now, like, juxtaposing this sort of jet setter Arno, with the movement. Like, I imagine there's so much like pent up curiosity.
Oh
that, and then as soon as that 7 years are up, and you kind of just you're done with this.
Right.
You explore the whole world. You take in everything, like you said, with this childlike mindset, and that must be so much fun for you.
Oh, it is, absolutely. I left hate groups in 1994, and I still have this active thirst for diversity, like only somebody who willfully deprived themselves of it for 7 years can have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And if anything, it's stronger than it was even then. But I do remember that first year after I left, I'm like, I can root for the Green Bay Packers. I can watch Seinfeld. I can listen to the Beastie Boys. I can talk to whoever I want to talk to. I can hang out with people. Yeah, it was definitely. It was a feeling of freedom.
Yeah.
And that was before I really started traveling. That was I didn't. Aside from a couple trips, one trip to Canada as a kid and one trip to Canada as a racist. I had never been out of, which was, we narrowly escaped actually. The first time I had been out of the United States was when I took my daughter to Mexico in 2007, I believe. And so I hadn't really been out of the country until then. And since then, I think I'm at 15, 16 countries, which isn't a whole lot.
You want more?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When I get new stamps on my passport, that's a big deal for me. And this year was the first year I literally traveled around the world and added Australia, France, Italy, and those are the new countries.
So in, let's say, 15 years, where do you hope to be, given your journey thus far, where do you hope to be in 15 years, whether it's changing the world? What kind of print do you want to have on the world?
I haven't really thought 15 years ahead. I've actually started thinking 5 years ahead, which is
You've started?
New to me. Yeah, started. Yeah, I've only recently. And I want to continue exploring storytelling. Mm-hmm. So I love creating content. I've been dabbling in filmmaking for 10 years while I was doing everything else, and I really want to kind of take the next step into filmmaking and keep pursuing that. Earlier this year, I produced my first film with a budget, which is a 7-minute documentary about a restaurant in Milwaukee called Damascus Gate, which is run by Syrian refugees. Mm-hmm. And we brought a bunch of kids from rural Wisconsin, from a town where there's not a single Muslim person, to come and eat lunch at Damascus Gate and hear the stories of the refugees who run the place and meet them and really just experience kinship with them and experience another culture. Mm-hmm. And it turned out great. I fortunately, in my past filmmaking stuff, I met some really amazing photographers who were willing to work pro bono, and we had already started the film and we were shooting stuff, and then I'm like, hey, maybe I can fund this somehow. So I started reaching out to people I knew and managed to get a few $1,000s together so that I could pay the photographers, and I paid myself a little bit, so now I'm a professional filmmaker.
Yeah, with a budget.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm like, I want to do more of that. And of course, once you start down that road, you always, and I guess to me it's really about the story, and the story is not, doesn't have to be limited by the budget. But of course, the more budget you have, the more options you have, the more resources you could bring to bear on telling that story. And so that's why I definitely want to continue in filmmaking. I think 15 years from now.
Not even a third book.
Yeah.
Come on, Arno.
Yeah, there'll be more books. Right now I'm doing my speaking, I'm doing educating, I'm working with this cadre of 40 people from all over the world in an ongoing 4-month project to address violent extremism through arts and culture. I'm developing a TV show. I'm working on a screenplay in collaboration with somebody else. And I'm
you need that week and
I do have a hard time focusing. I'm very much like I'm glad there's a word for it now. They call them serial starters. So it's like I'm a serial starter. I go and I'll start something and I'll be like, okay, bye.
I like how
you go ahead and run that now.
I like how in America they have a name, a word for everything. Literally, a word for everything.
Super obscure stuff that everybody knows.
Totally.
There's just no name for it. Yeah.
And then it becomes a thing, and then people start getting jobs for that title.
Exactly.
You're gonna become a serial starter, and anyone who's gonna start something, they're gonna look for Arno.
That's funny. Like instead of saying I can't follow through, I'll be like, no, I'm a serial starter. This is a strength. It's not a weakness.
Yes.
No.
And I do see some merit to that, but at the same time, there are times where it's like, okay, you got to buckle down and like follow this through, and complete a project,
Right.
see it through from start to finish. But I do have a tendency to like get a lot of balls up in the air, and sometimes they drop. Like that's part of learning. If you're not failing, you're not gonna progress.
It's true. Yeah.
So Arno, what your message to let's say teenagers around the world from different cultures, from different walks of lives? What would you tell them? What's
two things. First of all, every single human being creates their own reality. One of the most amazing things about being a human being is that we find what we look for in life. So if I want to find reasons to be angry, I want to find reasons to hate people, reasons to hurt people, reasons to see myself as separate from other people, I will find those reasons everywhere I look. Mm-hmm. And no matter, sometimes it's going to take some serious spin for me to concoct these reasons out of whatever it is I see. But that's just the nature of our minds. Our minds do that every single day. So conversely, if I want to find reasons to feel connected to other human beings, if I want to find reasons to cultivate love every day, if I want to find reasons to have faith in humanity, I will find those everywhere I look also. And it's actually a lot more difficult to do that sometimes than it is to find negative things. And what that means is it's all the more rewarding when you do. And you can. Because I do it every day. And now I've conditioned myself to do it. And it's not easy. But it's very rewarding. So be mindful that you can find whatever it is you're looking for. And then be very mindful of what you look for. Because you're the one who decides that also. Yeah. That's not up to anybody but you. Yeah. The other thing that really a part of my message I try to get across to people, it comes from my personal mission statement, which is I'm working to bring about a society where all people are valued and included.
I know. Wouldn't it be amazing if everyone who walks in this world finds themselves?
Yeah. And they're valued, not only self-valued, but valued by society. Yeah. And they're included in society. Yeah. That's the kind of world I want to live in. That's the kind of world I want my daughter to live in. Yeah. I want you guys to live in. I want all the people I love to live in.
I know.
And the more people are valued and included in society, the better off we all are.
I know.
Because when you feel valued and included, you're less likely to go attack someone or hate somebody or steal from someone. Right. It's when you have a healthy sense of who you are, and that is the inner peace starts inside. That's very important to understand. Like, it's up to us. But we are shaped by the world around us as well.
Right.
And if the world around us is one where our fellow human beings care about us and they're nurturing us and they value us and they include us, it's going to help us realize our best selves, the best version of ourselves. And if you're living in a society where everybody's at their best version, or at least like realizes what that is and aspires to it, think how transformative that is to everything that happens every day.
That would be amazing.
Oh, it's awesome. And it's just, again, if I'm talking to someone and I want to get across to them that it's in their best interest for everyone to be valued and included. It's in their best interest to live in a diverse society.
It is.
Because when you do, it's just your family, your scope of family is just that much greater. It's that wider.
Yeah, you gain friends, you gain families, and those friends become families.
Right,
literally.
right, totally.
Yeah, and anywhere you go, you like, for example, now I have so many friends everywhere.
Yeah.
If I go to any state in America, probably like 20 states in America,
right.
I have a family that I can stay there.
That's pretty amazing.
I won't have to pay hotel. Yeah, so you kind of have those families
right,
all over the world, and you just, when you open, because I used to not have a lot of trust, like trusting everyone. It used to be a huge.
Could imagine.
Yeah, so I would be scared of people because I don't know what they're thinking and what I went through as a child and whatever.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when you learn how to trust, people trust you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and then it becomes that like a great relationship because you're trusting each other. But you have to pull it out first, because I believe we get what we get what we give. Like,
oh, totally.
Yeah. So yeah. So
you gotta
I think
put work into it too.
I know I think you give a lot of goodness to the world, that it's so easy for people to embrace you back.
Oh, thank you guys. I do, because I learned it from people like you and people like Pardeep, and I've been very, very lucky. And people like my mom and dad and my brother and like Yetta. My mom's friend who's librarian. I'm just super fortunate that my life has been filled with people of that caliber. To demonstrate for me, like, the possibility of doing it. So, yeah. It's interdependence.
Alex, Alejandro, what's your message?
I love, and it's kind of like what I told you before. Before we started recording, is just the words you use paint such a vivid picture.
Oh, thanks, man.
Not only in your books, but in your words and your speeches. And I mean, I believe every word that comes out of your mouth. There's such benevolence behind those words.
Thank you.
And I think, this mindset that you have is nothing but beneficial for the world. And
thanks, man.
I'm happy to know you. I'm happy
likewise.
to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's truly special.
Right on. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all.
You're a special human being.
I think one of the most special things I've ever done is to be on the first episode of a Muchu podcast.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And you helped coming up with a name, and as you always.
Yeah, we'll take it from here. We'll run with it.
Yeah. We can't wait to see what this,
It's going to be exciting.
Wow. What an episode, huh?
That was amazing. That was amazing. Arno is just incredible. I'm always amazed by him. Thank you so much, listeners, for staying with us and go through all these, we were, we feel you. It was just incredible. I know for sure you learned something. We can't wait for you next week to listen to our next interview.
Anyway, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to our first episode of A Moot Show. Make sure to tune in next week to listen to our next episode.
follow us on all our social media handles. Keep up with us. We have a lot to share with you. Just say Umucho Podcast Instagram, and you can go Facebook or Twitter, Tumblr. We're doing everything. We want to educate as many people as we can.
Yep. And you can be sure to listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the podcasts.
He can say it. It's in my language.
Yeah, that's right.
Umucho.
No, that's not.
Umucho Podcast. It's UMUCO.
On all the platforms that provide podcast.
That's where you're going.
That's what I was going.
That's English.
Right. I am from the South. I'm just kidding. All listeners from the South. Yeah, but you can definitely listen to us on all the podcast platforms, YouTube included. So everybody stay tuned for more episodes.
Stay tuned.